Welcome into episode 173 of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm Augustrometer.
The malware infecting 1 in 10 Macs, the less than heroic tale of Social Captain, and are you smarter than the average startup? Find out on this edition of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. Well, it's not exactly sweeping the nation, but it's not as far gone as it ought to be either. Apple Insider ran a piece recently on the top malware threat for the Mac. According to the piece, security firm Kaspersky says that in 2019, the Slayer Trojan infected 1 in 10 Mac users, opening the door to malicious apps that hide behind fake error messages about users needing to update Flash. I guess my first question, August, is it still 2006 and nobody told me?
Sometimes it feels like it. But even Chrome now is disabling Flash, and that makes me so very happy. Flash was fun while it lasted, but Steve Jobs' thoughts on Flash was remarkably prescient.
Now, it's not that Slayer is that old. The piece says this Trojan has only been active since early 2018. But last year specifically, it was the most common threat to Mac OS. Apple Insider says around 10% of all Macs were attacked with it, and by itself, Slayer represents 30% of all the Trojans detected on Mac OS. Now, it's been a while since we've talked about Trojans here. Can you remind people what they are and what they do?
Sure. Trojans are short for Trojan horses, just like in the history books. They disguise themselves as something innocent, but when you click on them, they install software that you definitely do not want on your computer. The software can be anything from adware to keyloggers, and many times information is sent back to the creator of the Trojan, which then can use that information to, say, access your bank records.
Okay, so then what is it that makes Slayer particularly troubling?
Well, Apple Insider says the Slayer Trojan is a delivery mechanism for a variety of malware payloads. It gets onto a Mac, and then while not specifically harming the machine itself, it fetches other malicious code, typically adware.
All right, hold on a second, if you will. Since we're scrolling down memory lane, I know we've talked about adware before, but again, if you could remind people why adware is bad.
Yeah, adware, is kind of what it says. It presents ads on your screen, and in some cases, it's just bothersome. You have to close out of the ad, or maybe it takes you to a site that you don't want to go to, maybe a site that collects your information. In other cases, it can essentially load your screen with so many ads that your computer freezes up. Okay,
so now, if you would, let's talk specifically about Slayer. What are some of the ins and outs? What are some of the worst bits?
Well, there's sort of 3 stages to Slayer. And by the way, I kind of feel like we need a Buffy here.
See, I was thinking hairband, but yeah, either one's fine.
First, the user clicks on a link to a site that downloads the Slayer Trojan to the Mac. There's thousands of these sites because of the network of Cybermen. Wait, that's Doctor Who. So cyber bad guys. But real legit sites such as YouTube have these links as well. The bad guys put them in the description of the video. In most cases, when you click one of these links, you're taken to another site which asks you to download the software. And this is one of those download Flash sites because it says your version of Adobe Flash is out of date. Once you click on the download button, the Trojan is downloaded and you're asked to install the application. But it doesn't follow the normal install procedure. Instead, you're asked to right-click and choose Open Package. And then when installed, Slayer downloads adware or other apps. Now, it shouldn't be able to do this, but it tricks you. It overlays the Mac's trust button with one that just says OK. And when you click OK, you're actually clicking through to the trust button to give permission for that app to install. Now that you've done all of that, adware is installed and you're bombarded by ads.
Okay, so much about this seems so wrong. Starting with, why do Mac users think they need Flash?
I feel like this sort of attack really works against more non-technical folks, like my mom. She'll see a message and she will say, oh, I guess I should install this because it says so. And then they're stuck with this malware on their computer. So my recommendation is to talk to your loved ones about this. Tell them Flash is evil and never install it ever again.
Okay, so then there's the part where legit sites like YouTube can be a home to these links. I know more video has probably been uploaded to YouTube since I started this sentence than I'd be able to watch in a lifetime, but is there nothing guarding against malicious links on legitimate sites?
Honestly, I don't know why YouTube and other social media sites aren't filtering for these kind of links. It's really rather surprising, and shame on them for not doing it.
And then I guess the last thing I'm wondering is whether this is happening to Macs running older operating systems rather than just the latest generation. Because I would think that Gatekeeper or something like Gatekeeper should be keeping this from happening, shouldn't it?
It should, but the way this particular Trojan works is pretty insidious. You actually give permission to have the app installed. They cover up that trust button, and the trust button bypasses any gatekeeping. In addition, some variations of the Slayer Trojan install a browser extension instead of an app. You also give permission for this, but again, it disguises the permission buttons.
Okay, so I'm going to guess a few things that you might suggest to guard against this. First of all, keep your operating system updated. Second, don't download stuff from outside the App Store. And then third, run a good anti-malware or antivirus suite. Did I get those right? And what else would you suggest?
I think you nailed it. But I would also add to check your security preferences. Make sure it's set to only allow installation of apps from the App Store. That way, even if you hit trust, it's just not going to allow you to install it. And as I said earlier, talk to your loved ones who might not understand technology and Trojans. They will thank you for it.
After they're done rolling their eyes. Of course, all this only tells us how to avoid, getting these things. If you've already got Slayer, well, I guess, how do you find out if you do have it? And then what do you do if you do have it?
Well, if you do have it and you're getting all kinds of ads, that's the indication that you have it. The best thing you can do, and you already mentioned this, is to get a malware scanning app that will find and remove anything that shouldn't be on your Mac. Do we know any of those?
I may know some people. And now, the checklist players present this. August?
Yes, Ken?
Can I please have your Instagram username and password?
No.
I'll boost your ranking.
Still no.
And scene. That's probably how things should have gone, could have gone for Social Captain. Sadly, it is not how they went. TechCrunch tells the tale of Social Captain, a social media boosting service that, wait for it, you'll never guess, exposed thousands of Instagram passwords. According to the report, the company Social Captain says it helps thousands of users to grow their Instagram follower counts by connecting their accounts to its platform. Users are asked to enter their Instagram username and password into the platform to get started, but TechCrunch found out that Social Captain was storing the passwords of linked Instagram accounts in unencrypted plain text. Any user who viewed the web page source code on their Social Captain profile page could see their Instagram username and password in plain sight, so long as they had connected their account to the platform. Sounds bad. Gets worse. TechCrunch goes on to say a website bug allowed anyone access to any Social Captain user's profile without having to log in. Simply plugging in a user's unique account ID into the company's web address would grant access to their Social Captain account and their Instagram login credentials. Now, I'm going to cut them a tiny bit of slack here. How would I have gotten to the user's unique account ID?
Well, first of all, this whole thing just drives me crazy, and I think Social Captain should be busted down to social private.
Maybe even just what's the word? Discharge from the whole social army.
Exactly. Instagram allows you to change your handle, so they use an ID to identify every user. Unfortunately, they also have an API which allows you to see these IDs. Even worse, and this is on Instagram, the IDs are all sequential numbers. So anyone could write some code that started at 1 and worked its way up to the last user who signed up.
I'm sorry, you're saying that the Instagram IDs are sequential?
Yes, they are.
Huh. Okay. I'm sure it'll be fine. This whole thing sounds a bit like a job for two-factor authentication.
Yeah, if you have an Instagram account, make sure two-factor authentication is turned on. In fact, if you have any account of any kind online, make sure two-factor authentication is turned on.
And as August has said before, if they don't offer it, bug them till they do. Like I said, this whole thing sounded worse, and yet it gets worse still. TechCrunch goes on to say, I know, kind of crazy. TechCrunch goes on to say, because the user account IDs, now this is for Social Captain, I think. Because the user account IDs were for the most part sequential, it was possible to access any user's account and view their Instagram password and other account information with relative ease. There was a fast food chain that we talked about, I want to say in late 2018, that was doing that. I can't remember which one it was, but one of them was storing user information sequentially, so all you had to do was change one number and you'd be on to the next user info, and then of course change one number again, you're on to the next and the next. I understand why that's bad. I mean, it's pretty easy to figure out. How should things like this be categorized? How should they be, you need some sort of, not sequence, but some way of doing this. I mean, how should these things be categorized?
Sure, in some cases, that's not too terribly bad, but honestly, every user should have a unique, impossible-to-guess ID, something that uses letters and numbers, not just numbers, which anyone could just run through. You could do this either through hashing, or you could do it with, there's all kinds of different ways to do this so that no one could just guess an ID.
Now, at this point, you may be wondering how much worse it can get. And for a small number of people, it can still get worse. The piece says a security researcher gave TechCrunch a spreadsheet with about 10,000 scraped user accounts. 4,700 of those included Instagram usernames and passwords. Most of the rest included Instagram usernames and email addresses. The piece says the data also showed up accounts where free or paid premium accounts were in use. Only about 70 accounts were paying customers, the data said, but many of those premium accounts also contain the customer's billing address. The good news: TechCrunch told Social Captain about the issue and Social Captain fixed it. The bad news: not everybody who should know about the problem knows about it yet. The CEO of Social Captain was quoted in the piece as saying early analysis indicates that the issue was introduced during the past weeks when the endpoint, meant to facilitate integration with a third-party email service, has been temporarily made accessible without token-based authentication. As soon as we finalize the internal investigation, we will be alerting users that could have been affected in the event of a breach and prompt them to update the associated username and password combinations. There are two things there that I want to break down. First of all, can you explain the endpoint meant to facilitate integration with a third-party email service was temporarily made accessible without token-based authentication? If you could demystify those terms and then tell me why they would make it accessible without the token-based authentication.
Well, an endpoint is part of the API. So anytime you access an API, you're accessing an endpoint. And in this case, it's to get information about the users that Social Captain had in their database. The meant to facilitate integration with a third-party email service, that's so that they can email those users. But what it sounds like to me, when they say was temporarily made accessible without token-based authentication, the email service was able to access all of the data basically with no authentication. They just had access to everything.
Which is fine because they're trusted by Social Captain. The problem is, I'm going to tie this into something that we say a lot of times. A backdoor for the good guys is a backdoor for the bad guys, too. Even if you assume that Social Captain's on the up and up and their third-party email thing is on the up and up, correct me if I'm wrong, basically once they took off the token authentication or the token-based authentication, they just left the backdoor open, trusting that, my good guy needs to come in and out, in and out, in and out here. So I'm going to leave the backdoor open. And it turns out maybe bad guys might have been able to find that and get in.
Exactly. It's like basically telling your neighbor, hey, I don't have a spare key, so I'm leaving my back door open so you can take care of my cat.
Which is fine for your neighbor, but then if somebody's walking down the alley behind your house and looks over and sees the back door open, well, the back door's open.
Bingo.
So then talk to me about this second part. Why wait to find out who might have been affected? Wouldn't it be better just to tell everybody to change their password out of an abundance of caution, let's say?
If you have a Social Captain account and you're using Instagram, change your Instagram password immediately. I'd be grabbing my keyboard right now and changing the password. And I would think again about Social Captain. No offense to them, but boy, they just exposed a lot of data.
Now, for its part, TechCrunch says Instagram said the service breached its terms of service by improperly storing login credentials. We're investigating and will take appropriate action. We strongly encourage people to never give their passwords to somebody they don't know or trust, said an Instagram spokesperson. See also all of your passwords. Yeah?
Strong, unique passwords. Use a password manager. If you find out about any sort of a breach with any of your services, change that password. And yes, please don't ever share passwords.
Not surprisingly, TechCrunch says users who signed up to Social Captain should change their Instagram passwords immediately. And if you use the same password for anything else, you must be new here. Coming up, a round of applause for checklist listeners. We'll tell you why in a bit, but first a word about MacScan 3 from Secure Mac. Macs are everywhere. More people using Macs means more personal information, medical information, financial information, more of our lives flowing through the Mac. You know it, I know it, and bad guys know it too, making each Mac a tempting target. Protect yours with MacScan 3. MacScan 3 is a great defense against malicious software attacks aimed at your Mac. It's developed by Secure Mac, trusted names in computer security and developers of exceptional security software for over 20 years. MacScan 3 detects and removes Mac malware, catches keyloggers, removes tracking cookies, and provides full-range or targeted scanning, all without crowding up your hard drive or slowing down your computer. Serve more securely with MacScan 3 from Secure Mac. Sign up for a free 30-day trial today at securemac.com/MacScan. That's MacScan 3 by Secure Mac. Your 30-day free trial is waiting at securemac.com/MacScan. I came across a list last week that I absolutely love. It was on Medium, written by Mikko Hyppinen. He's the Chief Research Officer of F-Secure. He's written for Wired and Scientific America, and he published this list, the 10 most common security problems that startup companies fall into. Now, I know this sounds specialized, but wait till you hear it. We're going to do a quick call and response. I'm going to read the enumerated items, and August is going to flesh them out. Mr. Trometer, are you ready?
Bring it.
All right. Item 1, note that speed is the enemy of security.
Zuckerberg famously said, move fast and break things. But he moved fast and broke Facebook security in the process. The faster you move and develop and deploy, the more likely you'll have uncaught bugs. Your QA team, if you even have one, since you're trying to move fast, won't be able to catch them. Security is what you start with. It's a foundation. It's not something that you add later.
Item 2, do not invent stuff which has been invented already.
There are great libraries and great software that's already been developed. Things for encryption and hashing and all kinds of security-related things. Don't reinvent the wheel. You'll get it wrong.
Item 3, trust the cloud.
If you're using AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud, you're on the right track. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars to make sure their systems are secure, and that benefits you.
Item 4, but use the cloud right.
Make sure you're using the security of these systems right, and that means making your developers use a password manager. Where have we heard that before? Also, never include API keys in your code base. These should all be managed by a senior developer, and you should have credentials for your local development, staging and testing development, and for production. There are websites that literally scan GitHub, and they do it to find API credentials. You don't want that to happen to you and your startup.
Item 5, make sure everybody has their mobile devices locked by default.
Yeah, Face ID or Touch ID is fine, but also make sure everyone on the team is using two-factor authentication. If it's based on SMS, that's okay, but if possible, use an authenticator app such as Google Authenticator.
Number 6, get a Mac.
A lot of people think Macs are more secure than Windows, and that's not really true. What makes them more secure is there are fewer Mac users, so bad guys target Windows. That said, as the number of Macs out there grow, the more you should have a virus scanning app.
Now I'm going to try to save you a little bit of hate mail. It's debatable whether or not Macs are more secure than Windows. I know a lot of people think they're just intrinsically more secure. The number of attacks against Macs has been on the rise for quite a while. This is a point that was made in this list. We're not looking to actually, figure out exactly how many angels can dance on the head of this pin. I think we both agree, and I think everybody listening would have to agree that, the Macs have become, it's like I said in the ad earlier, they're more prevalent targets these days than they've ever been, so they're less secure than they've ever been.
Correct.
So, yeah, get a Mac. That was item 6 on the list. Item 7, back up.
Yeah, always continue to back up your computer. Not only does this help when you have data loss, but if you're attacked with ransomware, all you need to do is restore from a backup and the ransomware is gone. But hackers can get to your cloud backups and delete them, so make sure you have offline backups as well. It used to be called the sneaker net because they do a backup and then run it to the bank and put it in a safe deposit box. So always make sure you have a backup that hopefully isn't stored in your home in case there's a fire, and that hackers can't get to.
Item 8, patch it.
Automatic updates, am I right?
Well, it depends who you ask.
Seriously, keep everything up to date because those updates are usually for security, and double check from time to time to make sure that you're running the most recent version. If the update fails, it can do so silently, and you'll never know you're out of date.
Item 9, prepare for people moving around.
This is a big one. People get fired, hired, retired, whatever, all the time. And when they leave, they might still have access. So make sure you have someone in charge of removing access to everything, including social media. You don't want a disgruntled employee creating lots of havoc on your systems.
Let me ask you a question really quickly. Is at the time of a startup the time to start with a mobile device management program or an MDM?
The problem is a lot of startups, it's sort of bring your own device.
Sure. And
when you start putting MDM software on somebody else's laptop, people get kind of
their phone.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
People get kind of touchy about that. So I would say, it really it depends on the size of the team. And whether or not you're giving them a computer. If you're giving them a computer, then yes, start early.
Right. But so basically this is talking then about keeping the stuff in your office, making sure that that's clean and safeguarded, not Joe Schmo's phone who came to work with you for 6 weeks.
Right.
Item number 10, watch out for business email compromise.
Make sure that only necessary people can move money in the company. That's so huge. You don't want someone answering an email and accidentally funneling investor dollars to somebody else's account. This goes for credit cards as well. Know who has access. Make sure they know the rules.
And item 11 on this 10-item list, double check your stuff.
All startups are trying to make money, which means you're billing somebody. And if you mess up, you just lost a customer. So test everything, especially billing. Have your systems pen tested, which means penetration tested by a third-party company. Have your code audited first in-house and then by a third-party company. And then hire a security expert. Trust me, it's totally worth the cost.
Now, can I tell you what it is that I love about this list?
What's that?
It's stuff that we've been talking about here for years. I mean, a lot of it is stuff that I might have known if I thought about it, but none of it was really ingrained. But I mean, if you go through this list, item 1, note that speed is the enemy of security. I mean, basically, take your time in the stuff you're doing. Number 2, don't invent stuff which has already been invented already, which means use solutions that are already out there, like password managers instead of your cute way of coming up with new passwords, 2-factor authentication, things like that. Stuff that's already out there can keep you safer. Number 3, trust the cloud. Number 4, but use the cloud right. Sort of goes to knowing what services like Dropbox and iCloud Backup are doing and what you can do with them. Number 5, have your mobile device locked by default. That falls under the duh category. Number 6, get a Mac. Okay, that's kind of a personal one for me, sure. Number 7, backups. We've talked about, I want to say, since the second or third episode of the checklist. I mean, it's been a refrain here for a very long time. Number 8, patch it. Stay on top of your updates. I will tell you, Mr. Trometer, I do stay on top of my security updates.
Good for you. Good for you.
Number 9, prepare for people moving around. Okay, that one's not so applicable here. But number 10, very applicable. Watch out for business email compromise is basically be aware of phishing scams and how to avoid them. And number 11, double check your stuff. I would change that to keep on top of your stuff. This is all stuff that we have been saying here since the beginning of this show. And if you've been following the stuff that we've been saying, you're smarter than the average startup.
Like Social Captain.
Somebody is waiting to hand you tens of millions of dollars. Somebody right now is waiting. They're looking at you going, he looks like a unicorn. Probably in a good way. Hey, if you're looking for more security news and how-tos, the place to look is securemac.com/checklist. There you'll find notes for this show, for the last show we did, all the way back to the very first show. And you can listen to every show right there as well. securemac.com/checklist. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a topic you would like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. That address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. And we'll talk to you next week.